In today's video on genetic inheritance, we will be debunking a common misconception, which is, if parents who are carriers for a recessive disease have a child who is affected, the next 3 children are risk-free. Each cell in your body contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, 1 copy inherited from each parent. You inherit 1 copy of a chromosome from your mother and 1 copy of a chromosome from your father. These chromosomes contain the genes that will determine many physical characteristics and even medical conditions you may have. To further explain gene inheritance, let's consider eye color. Each parent has a distinct phenotype, which is the expression of a gene. Brown eyes are the dominant form of the gene, meaning only 1 copy is needed for expression, while 2 copies of the recessive gene are required to have blue eyes. An individual has a heterozygous genotype if they have 1 dominant and 1 recessive copy of a gene, and would still express a dominant phenotype with brown eyes. For 2 parents that are heterozygous, there are 4 genetic combinations for the children. In 3 scenarios, the child will inherit a dominant gene, therefore there is a 75% chance of having a child with brown eyes and 25% chance of having a child with blue eyes. If one parent is heterozygous for brown eyes and the other has blue eyes, then there is only a 50% chance of having a child with brown eyes. The parent with blue eyes can only pass on the recessive copy, whereas the brown-eyed parent has a 50-50 chance of passing on the dominant or recessive gene. Meet Young and Cheyenne. They are both healthy individuals, but they are carriers for cystic fibrosis, which is the most fatal genetic disease in Canada. They are heterozygous since they each have 1 dominant functional and 1 recessive non-functional copy of this disease. They have a daughter, Lily, who has cystic fibrosis since she inherited 1 recessive gene from each of her parents. Young and Cheyenne are planning on having another child. They know that they are both carriers for CF and need to think about gene inheritance. Young and Cheyenne believe that their next 3 children will not have cystic fibrosis, since their daughter Lily is affected by this condition. Thus, she is the 1 out of 4 of their children who will get this disease. Hence, their next child will either inherit 2 functional copies or be a carrier. This is a misconception. Each child has the same probability for inheriting the disease, 25% chance. However, each child's outcome is independent of each other, and even though they already have a child affected by CF, each child they decide to have has the same likelihood of inheriting the 2 genes that cause this recessive disease. Thus, no child is risk-free when their parents are carriers or affected by this disease. Now for a quick summary of what we have learned in this video. Is it possible for all of Young and Cheyenne's children to have cystic fibrosis? The answer is yes. Although rare, they could both pass on the recessive gene for each child they have. Lily has grown up and is planning to start a family with Chad, who has 2 functional copies of the cystic fibrosis gene. Is it possible for any of their children to have CF? The answer is no, since all of their children will inherit a dominant functional gene from Chad. It is not possible to have a child with 2 recessive non-functional copies, which would result in CF.